Ladies and gentlemen, theys and thems, and all colors and sorts, welcome back to RPGB. We're discussing the 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide with my friends Sean and Kevin. We want to talk a little about the organization of the 2024 DMG because I think it is such an improvement over the last version because it's so much easier to find things and it's more intuitive, right? You start with the basics of how to play the game and you leave the more advanced auxiliary stuff further to the end, right? Before it was like just seemed random.
What? They just rolled dice.
But you know, they have this section on the DM's toolkit, and I think that there's a lot of great stuff in here. It tells you how to deal and kind of deal with these singular parts in pieces. So, for instance, like they have how to handle environmental effects, which I think is something that a lot of people struggle with because it's like, well, I want to say that there's a landslide, but I don't know how much damage to make this landslide, and so it's like, well, I can compare it to a spell, but I have to know those spells. So
isn't there like a table now or something that shows like, oh, if this happened, it'll be this, like, where it shows you kind of like the level of like how big, like if a meteor, I think is actually the example they gave in the video, like a meteor hits, it's gonna be this d20. Like, is that kind of what you're getting at?
Sort of. That's sort of more onto and we'll get to that eventually, which is the degrees of success and failure, which I think is the other out of the park hit. And again, this is something that other systems have had and like other creators have talked about, but I think that is chef's kiss because that's something, again, people don't intuitively know how to do. So
or doors is just as hard to break down.
No. They've done some more quality of life things in terms of like updating the language, like the madness tables aren't in here. Instead, they have fear and mental stress, be more inclusive, which I think is great. There's still firearms and explosives. And then the real sort of meat of the DM's toolbox, it's its own section called Creating Adventures, and there's one called Creating Campaigns. It is supposed to take you through how to create an adventure step by step. It gives you everything from how to come up with a premise, a conflict, a situation, adventure setting, all kinds of things. I think that section is one of the ones where I think it's a little weaker because I don't think it gives you the best practical advice. Because at one point, and I think I heard this from Mike Shea on Sly Flourish, and then I looked it up. It says the more you prep, the better your sessions will be. And I along with a lot of people are scratching their head going like, oh, I don't know if that's true. Because I know for most DMs, over preparation is the issue, not too little. Even for me, a lot of times it's like, oh, I didn't need a 15th of this content because I just spent an hour and a half talking to some dude in a bar.
They want to stay in the bowling alley.
Yeah.
I can't get them to leave the bowling alley.
Yeah. So it does make an attempt at that, and the same thing with the Creating Campaigns, which I think is even a little bit more complicated. They even offer, there's a lot of like handouts and worksheets with this. So I know you guys don't know a ton about that.
I actually have a question.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Something I'm really pleased about to see, and I find it hilarious, exactly on what we're talking about. In the Creating Adventures chapter, they have a draw in the players page, which is one page. And then it goes adventure patrons, as in a DMPC who could maybe shepherd them.
Yeah.
It then has supernatural hooks. And I thought, that's nice. Give some ideas for that.
Yeah.
And then they say happenstance hooks. That's 2 pages in the whole book. I don't know. Maybe that's something they're like, hey, you have to do some of this job yourself. Maybe that's fair. I feel like that could have been a longer section with a lot of more advice. What if they don't like X, Y, and Z? How do I enchant them with this idea?
Yes.
Or change my story midstream?
Right. Focusing it more on player buy-in, I think is what you're saying.
Yeah.
And they do officially put in session 0 and stuff, which I think is great.
Sure.
They've talked a lot about how that is impactful because of the sheet that makes you nice.
The tracking sheet or the lines and veils.
Lines and veils, yeah.
The sheet that makes you nice. Coming soon from RPG.
but
That's a shirt.
but that but having player buy-in, I think, is really what needs to be said. And I think a lot of I think there's a lot of places where they included things in this book, and it's a chonky boy,
Yeah, it's a big book,
Which
much
is-
longer.
but there's like some missed opportunity where they could have incorporated some more things rather than sort of this like generic advice. Like there's a lot of generic advice about like have fun. Some of it's great. Like they have a section about dealing with
He was like, have fun. These absolute losers.
Cut that.
Some of it's good though.
Cut that. Don't
what I
have
really like.
fun.
But
like
they have a
this.
section on how to deal with antisocial players, like antisocial behavior as their fantasy, and like how, and basically they say you can say no, you can say
Yeah.
right?
That's good.
Which
But
I feel like in like news groups and whatnot is like the one thing that people are always like, I have this player that came to my table and he did all this like chaos and whatnot. And how do I tell him to leave? I'm like,
that's like
say bye.
that's like the number one Reddit topic.
Yeah.
And people still don't get it.
But-
So no
but-
printing it in there.
But hold on now. You got to be fair to these people. Sometimes you go,
Oh,
do you want to play this game? And you haven't even done a good enough job to explain what it is.
Yeah.
They show up and they're like, so are we having 8 beers? Is that
Yeah.
not what we're... Because you never discussed
Or
this
is-
board game with me.
Is this like a video game? Can I just go and kill
Yeah.
things and get loot and money
Yeah.
and
And again, Session Zero will solve a lot of these problems, but it could also be it's their brother, sister,
yeah,
husband,
They live with them.
wife,
Yeah.
right, friend, co-worker. There's a lot of things that complicate this, so it's good to know that they're at least a little bit further down the line of helping with that.
yeah. So overall, I think many of the tools they include in the DM's toolbox, the adventure creation adventures and creating campaign, is semi helpful. I think it's a mixed bag depending on how much you know.
It's a grab bag.
But also, I think a lot of it is setting up players, a little bit of new players for failure because of that thing where they're like, prep as much as you can. And like, a lot of this goes along with some of the worksheets they include. Some of them are great. They make a lot of sense. Like they have one for magic items, which we'll get to when we talk about magic
Yeah.
items. It's stellar. But then there's ones like a campaign pitch or like a premise, and it's got like a few lines on it. And it's kind of a letdown because it's like it doesn't really help you fill in blanks. It's not like if you're trying to teach new players how to do this stuff, they got to be able to fill in the blanks, right?
Okay.
But overall, that's kind of my impression of that section of the book.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Did you guys have any other questions about?
That's the
you're
face that
saying-
some people have when they just look at the DMG.
So what you're saying is there are words on a page that you have to read.
Yeah. Well,
That is how books and book sales work.
it can also be an electronic web page that you can read.
True. That's
But
true.
here's the thing.
Can you just
If you have D&D Beyond and you just load everything in there, you don't have to read anything. You just like click and all the calculate. So if you don't like reading, D&D Beyond.
I've worked with like on movies and stuff where the director is like,
Humble brag.
he doesn't want to read the script, so they hire a PA to read the script into a microphone, and then he listens to it. And I'm like, really? You're directing this movie and you can't just read the script? So read the book.
You're a dungeon master and you can't just read this book.
No,
All right.
I have to
A non-reader advocating you to read. So think about that, folks.
read.
We will catch you next time. Let us know like which of the
I'll read your
DMs
comments.
That's like a minute too late for what he wanted it to be.
Let's make the tell us what you like, which items you like about the DM's toolbooks.
Yeah, chapters,
section,
maybe?
the adventure prep, the adventures. Oh, one last thing I do want to say about this section, which grinds my gears a little bit. They should have a section of this that actually shows you how to prepare a campaign or an adventure, right? Like a step-by-step process for crafting an adventure. And
They don't have that? I thought they
Well, on page 105, it says step-by-step
right,
adventures.
but let's look at it, okay?
I think it's going to be one page, is my guess.
What was the page count? What was the next?
Let's see.
The
What's
next
the,
thing.
what's the page?
Well, we
105.
105.
105. 105.
This will be quick. Okay.
This is actually what it would be like at a table as well.
Yeah.
Alright.
This is
All right.
mid-game.
Step 1: lay out a premise. Determine the situation or conflict that underscores the adventure. Also think about the adventure setting and what is unique and fun about it. Bad advice.
What about that? I kind of disagree with. They have a whole section on it over here.
Right. Okay, let's read some of it. Okay. One way to start brainstorming, like all this is like brainstorming advice. It's like inspirational advice.
Well, they
I'm
can't
talking
tell
about
you
practical
exactly how to do it,
step-by-step
but they
guide
all-
for prepping. like not that everyone's going to use it. You're going to create your own system. But like,
Right.
for instance, like going back to like, for instance, like the Lazy Dungeon Masters guy, right? He gives you a step-by-step option to
Like
to
granular.
follow. Yeah, just because when you're a new DM, like I question, like, okay, I've got a premise, right? Which is a bunch of goblins dealing drugs, right?
That's good. I would be a goblin.
Why'd you
do I
waste
sort-
that?
How do I sort of structure that and make that fit in a limited amount of time, right? And I think they could have done a better, more specific job because a lot of this is like, right, like there's a section on adventure conflict. A premise can be a good starting point before you can turn into an adventure. It needs a conflict worthy of the hero's attention, and it's like, it's kind of like you were talking about writing books the other day. How sometimes they don't help you write. Like, I mean, either you know what a conflict is or you don't, and like.
Interesting.
I don't think I don't know anybody who would be like, oh, I didn't know you needed a conflict.
Wait,
in
a story has to have a conflict?
I don't know. This is very interesting
I
because
think people know that intuitively because of like their media literacy, right? Which
Mm-hmm.
is like, I'm not saying this wouldn't help the rare person, but I'm saying like if you've watched enough television, you kind of most people go into DMing or even playing the game having an idea of a story in their head. They're like, how often have you had players come to your table and be like, all right, my backstory is that I've been a veteran of war for 15 years and my entire family came out with goblins, and it's like, you're level 1, bro.
Yeah.
Like, but they have this aspiration to be like, I want to be like this superhero.
Well, then what I find really interesting is I feel like we're a little split on this topic, but without the requisite time, and I bet page space is a big reason they don't have more stuff like that. Without the requisite time here, I think the people is who we should ask about how much or how little you think these sections on adventure planning and campaign planning would help.
Yeah.
Fair.
I'd love their opinions, and I'd love to know if you disagree with Mo. I mean, if you agree with Mo.
So tell me what you think. You know, tell me why I'm wrong, and tell me how you would like it to be if you think it should be different. Let us know in the comments. Like, subscribe at RBGBTV. We'll see you next time. Catch you on the flippin' down.